Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that note, the idea that the internet has been such a inspiration for creativity and innovation in the country, and the opportunities it's given for communication and entrepreneurship has been unprecedented. I guess I'd like to know, in that vein, does the internet need FCC regulation? And in light of the United States Court of Appeals decision tossing out the FCC's net neutrality rules, does the FCC intend to go around the Court of Appeals in some manner, or is it going to abandon this effort going forward? And what does the future look like under this agreed-to premise that it seems like everybody's on the same table here, that we want to keep the internet free and open? And is it free and open because of FCC regulation or in spite of it? And what does the future look like as the FCC attempts to expand its role in this area? Because it gives great concern to many of us that once the FCC gets engaged in this effort, that it begins to have impacts on what is already such a great opportunity for freedom and creativity. Why do we need the FCC in this world? And what does the future look like once it gets in it?
An open internet is essential to an open economy, to an open government, to the things that we've all been talking about here. I'm a big history buff. I think that you start looking at today and tomorrow by looking at yesterday. The history of networks has been, how do you use networks to shut things down? The way AT&T was built was on the basis of Theodore Vail saying to independent telephone companies, hey, I've got this long lines here, and unless you sell out to me, you're not going to be able to get on. The internet is not a thing. The internet is a connection of other networks, of multiple networks. And we need to make sure that those kind of connections continue to exist and that there is openness in the ability to use the internet. I would take one thing, Mr. Yoder. The court was very explicit in saying that the FCC had jurisdiction over the operation of the internet based on Section 7. I'm sorry, based on the openness of the internet. We're not trying to get into the operation of the internet. I want to be real clear about that. But on the openness of the internet, based on Section 706. What I have announced that I will propose is that we go back and follow the court's direction at how that should be achieved. And the court clearly laid out in its opinion how that could be done, and we intend to follow that. The interesting thing is that immediately after the court decision, which threw out 2 of the 3 specific rules but said you have authority to fix the rules this way or that, immediately after that I got calls from the CEOs of the major internet service providers, all the household names that we all talk about, telephone companies, cable companies, saying, don't worry, we intend to stick with the rules, even though the rules aren't in place. And the question then becomes one of, that demonstrates that they are not burdensome, but at the same point in time, you need to go back to this issue of certainty. Because, well, I've got a voluntary agreement by 4 guys over here, but nobody else over here really has to stick with that. And so how do you come up with certainty that obeys what the court has said and puts forward a structure that the carriers themselves have said they can live with, that keeps the internet open? And that's what we're going to do.
Congressman, everyone believes in an open internet. And so the 4 freedoms that then Chairman Powell endorsed over a decade ago: freedom of consumers to choose content that they wish to view that was lawful, the freedom to use devices of their choices as long as it didn't harm the network, the freedom to know what some of these practices were in terms of network management, et cetera. All of these principles existed and were vindicated prior to the adoption of any so-called net neutrality or open internet rules. The internet was open before the FCC took action in this area, and I would dare say that assuming the FCC prioritizes what it should prioritize, which is removing barriers to infrastructure investment, that will continue to be the case tomorrow. My own view is that the net neutrality debate has been a solution in search of a problem. And so I think it's also a distraction from this, what I think is a higher priority, which is removing barriers. I would also add, tying it back to the discussion we just had about international internet governance, it's increasingly difficult for us to say on an international stage that the governments should not have a role in regulating the internet, whether it's operations or openness or what have you, when at home, there are strident voices saying that we should classify all broadband internet access as essentially a utility, like the electric company or like the railroads. That would deter an investment, that would increase government regulation, that would increase the difficulty of some of these multi-billion-dollar investment decisions that companies have to make. In short, it would increase uncertainty, the detriment of consumers. And so I hope that whatever course the FCC decides to chart in the years to come, it's mindful of the fact that businesses have to invest based on a regulatory environment that is certain. And the direction that the debate could go is one that would not lend itself to that.
Appreciate that. Thank you both.
Well, before we wrap